Thank you very much. Good morning. I find breakfast meetings always rather challenging because I'm not an early bird, but I think when the sun is out so early it feels like it's already a bit later in the morning. So, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure. Other than that it's very early, it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Lambert van Nistelrooy for taking initiative, and also I think I should thank him. It's about a year and a half late or 2 years late for insisting when the structural funds were negotiated that ICT should become a third priority, which was not obvious at the time, and I'm very pleased to hear that this has already resulted in many billions of programming for ICT, including broadband investments. I also would like to kind of thank and kind of happy to see Roland Strauss from Knowledge and Innovation. I mean, typically when you have these kind of presentations, you talk about big projects. More recently about the digital single market, or about Capital Markets Union, or the European Fund for Strategic Investment. But this morning, I think I would like to talk, and I'm not going to talk for very long, about two relatively smaller projects, but which we believe are very promising and could really kind of change the way we do innovation in Europe and the way we use European funding, and particularly Horizon 2020 funding, for stimulating innovation amongst SMEs and startups. And I think it's important also for ourselves to realize how thriving the startup community is in Europe. We have a bit of a tendency from time to time to talk ourselves down and say Silicon Valley, it's all happening outside of Europe, in the US, increasingly in Asia and in China, but there is a lot happening in Europe. There's a lot of kind of very interesting and potentially highly successful startup companies in many of, say, the ecosystems around Europe. The two kind of projects I wanted to briefly touch upon and tell you about, one we call Innovation Radar, and the other one is often kind of abbreviated, but then it becomes very technical: pre-commercial procurement and public procurement for innovation. When I joined DG Connect 4 years ago, it was still called DG Inso, I remember Nelly Cruz asking, so tell me, where are the successful SMEs in the research program? Where are they? Tell them, I want to meet them. I want to kind of know about their experience. And we had to say, well, frankly, we actually don't really know where the kind of successful, kind of highly innovative SMEs and startups are in our program at the time still, FP7. That's not good. I mean, it's a bit like kind of a passing visitor. You have an SME in the program, hopefully it will all go well, and then the SME disappears out of sight, and we have no idea what they do following the participation in the framework program. So we thought this had to change. We need to get some grip on where the high potential, the high flying SMEs are in our program, and how we could better help them and stimulate them to be successful, because of course doing a project and research is very important, but to get the research to market is even more important and often more challenging. And interestingly, the Commission has a lot of instruments actually to support SMEs. I mean, we can give technical advice, we can kind of help with the access to finance, internationalization strategies, IPR support. So there's a lot of kind of things we could do over and above funding for research and development, but we often have a mismatch. So we have kind of needs on the one hand, but for a very long time we weren't even aware whose needs these were. And on the other hand, we have instruments, and there was a clear problem of matchmaking. So what have we changed? And this we have started with FP7, because these are still the projects that are running. They started, say, 1, 2, 3 years ago, and Horizon 2020 is now kind of getting up to stream. So we thought we have to start with FP7. Let's try to map in FP7 where the interesting, the potentially kind of successful startup companies, SMEs are. And so we developed a mechanism, a tracker, using our reviews, using the independent experts, and say, well, let's look at a number of elements, a number of factors, and see if we could map those and come up with a list of successful or potentially successful SMEs. So that's what we did. Put a system in place. I mean, the colleagues are over there, Vero Pekka and Owen O'Neill. I mean, they work very diligently also with colleagues in the Commission, with the IPTS in Seville. And we built a system which gives us a very good and interesting insight in what's going on in our program, starting with FP7. Well, the kind of, I mean, it surprised us. I mean, we also met a lot of kind of SMEs that otherwise we would not have met. We would simply have made a payment at the end of the process, and we might not have seen them ever again. So we started to develop a relationship. We learned from them because they also told us about things that we could still improve. So there's now a feedback loop back into kind of Horizon 2020, the SME instrument, etc. And we are now managing to match. I mean, so we tell them, look, what do you think you need to be very successful? They say, well, we need an internationalization support, or we need another partner in the member state, or can you put us in touch with a venture capitalist or a business angel? So this is working really well. And we also found out that in every FP7 project there's about 2 innovations that come out of it. In most cases it's a process innovation or it's a software-based innovation because we do digital, and so that's the kind of the way innovation happens in digital. In 10% of cases it's a product. And that kind of 70% of these innovations actually get to the market at the end of it. And by now there's already 10% in the market of the projects that we've started to look at, and there's another 60% that will soon come to the market. We also found out that in 25% of cases innovations are mature but not brought to market. So that raises the question, why not? Is there any way we can do to help? Well, very positive experience on both sides. So now the next challenge is to really scale it up. I mean, we're doing it for ICT research, which is important, a lot of innovation happening in digital, as you know, but we would like to do this across the board with our colleagues in RTD and in other parts of the Commission, so that we have a grip and we can really kind of in a couple of years' time say, look, thanks to for Horizon 2020 or FP7, and thanks to the kind of the support mechanisms of the European Union, these and these companies now have succeeded that maybe otherwise would not have succeeded in the same way. Very concrete. We didn't have to propose legislation to negotiate in the Council and Parliament. We just did it. The second example that I wanted to give is on procurement, the pre-commercial procurement, which is essentially research. So you get together with some organizations and you say, look, I have a problem. Can you help as a public authority? What would you do? I mean, and then the second is really the procurement of the innovation itself. And we often talk about it being a problem for a startup or an SME to access finance, and that's true. But what is often even more of a problem is to get a first customer. If you have a particular innovation, I mean, get a customer to get it to market. This gives you a cash flow. It also gives you kind of some reputational benefits, so that you could say, look, but it has already been bought by this, that, and kind of public authority. So we've started with that in Horizon 2020. It's small scale. This needs to be launched and needs to be kind of scaled up in a big way. Procurement is very big in the European Union. I mean, 16-18%. We talk about hundreds of billions of euros that are spent every year by public authorities. Our trading partners like the US are much smarter about this. They use public procurement often to support SME growth. We have a long way to go to get better at it, but from the projects that we have launched, we've learned that it's working. There's a huge potential there. It's also interesting that typically when you do public procurement, there's 1.6% of public procurement is actually cross-border. So we don't really have an internal market for procurement. We still have a lot of national markets for procurement. If we do it with PCP, so the pre-commercial procurement or the public procurement of innovation, more than 30% is cross-border. So there we are really talking about kind of international cooperation and an internal market. So this we need to stimulate. We've got very positive experiences in a number of areas. We're going to try to scale this up in the next phase, but we need to get the member states on board. This is not easy, and so we need to put support mechanisms. We need to do a lot of training and events to sensitize the member states to really start using their public procurement instruments to drive innovation across the European Union and to support the growth of startups and the SMEs. But there's a huge potential there, and it's quite promising what we're seeing. That's what I wanted to say, so I'm quite happy, of course, to talk for longer, but there's another long list of speakers that need to speak now, so I'll leave it with this.